911, what's your emergency? There's a suspicious pickup truck parked on private property. It doesn't belong here. I think it might be stolen. That was how it all started. I was standing on my own front porch, holding a mug of coffee in my hand, watching the sheriff's cruiser roll down my dusty ranch road. The siren wasn't blaring, but the lights were flashing. My dog, Boomer, growled low from his spot beside my boots. 2 officers stepped out. Sir, we got a report about a stolen vehicle on this property. Mind if we take a look around? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at them, confused. You mean my truck? It was a Ford F-250, charcoal gray, with a toolbox mounted in the bed. It had my ranch name on the door, Green Rock Ridge. I'd owned that truck for nearly 7 years, paid it off last year. It had a small dent on the front bumper from when I hit a low stump last spring. That truck was mine, like Boomer was mine, like this land was mine. But before I could say another word, I saw her. Karen. That's what we all called her. Real name, Judith Cranston. Tall, thin, always wearing something white like she was allergic to color. She lived at the edge of the nearby HOA development about a mile down from my ranch. She stood on the edge of the dirt road now, arms crossed, fake smile plastered across her face as if she had done the world a favor. The same woman who once tried to report my scarecrow for being too lifelike. The same woman who complained my rooster was too enthusiastic in the mornings. And now, this. I stared at her, and she stared right back, smug and unbothered. That's when I remembered the camera. I'd installed security footage all around the ranch last year, after she tried to send the county out claiming my barn was a commercial facility. I nodded slowly, keeping my calm. Officer, I said, I have footage that shows exactly what happened this morning. Would you like to see it? The sheriff raised an eyebrow. You saying someone called in a false report? Let me show you, I said. And just like that, the mood shifted. But before I could reach for my phone or take them inside my ranch house, Boomer growled again. The officer's radio crackled. Sheriff, just got a call. Looks like the same woman who called in the pickup truck also reported visible firearms on the premises. Boom. There it was. Karen had escalated. The officers looked at each other. One of them dropped his hand toward his belt. You're going to want to stay calm, sir, the sheriff said slowly, scanning the area. We need to make sure nobody's in danger. That was when I realized this wasn't just some annoying HOA busybody behavior. She was trying to get me into serious trouble, possibly arrested, possibly worse. I nodded again and raised both hands slowly, not because I was guilty of anything, but because I knew how things could go south real fast if I didn't play this right. Sheriff, I said, voice firm but calm, I promise you, I have everything on camera. Everything. Please, let me show you before this gets out of hand. Karen, off to the side, smiled again, but it was different this time. Cold. Calculating. She didn't know I had the footage. She didn't know I'd watched it just 30 minutes before the sheriff arrived. She didn't know she had walked straight into her own trap, and that was when everything began to unravel. Let me back up a little so you understand how we got here. My name's Jake Coleman, 52 years old. I've run this ranch since I was 24. My dad passed it down to me when he died, and I've kept it going ever since. Cattle, chickens, a few goats. Enough to live simple and honest. I never signed up for drama. I'm not the kind of guy who yells or causes trouble. I like my space. I like my peace. That's why I live on land, not in a neighborhood where folks argue over grass height and mailbox color. But about 2 years ago, that HOA was built next to my land. It was called Pleasant Acres, irony at its finest. The people who moved in didn't bother me at first. A few were kind, brought pies, waved from their shiny SUVs. But Karen Cranston was different from day one. The first time we met, she walked up to my gate in high heels, holding a clipboard. Hello, I'm Judith Cranston. I represent the HOA over at Pleasant Acres, she said. We're just doing a perimeter inspection and noticed a few concerning items on your property, old machinery, stray animals, and what looks like, oh dear, is that a burn barrel? Ma'am, I said, you're about a half-mile outside your jurisdiction. That didn't stop her. For the next year, she kept trying to poke her nose into my business. She called animal control because Boomer barked too much. She reported my tractor for unauthorized vehicle use. She even sent me a printout with acceptable exterior paint colors. I laughed, threw it in the fireplace. But this new incident, the false 911 call, was different. It was serious. She had stepped into dangerous territory now, and I knew if I didn't handle it smart, it could cost me everything. That morning, I'd woken up like usual, before sunrise, let the chickens out, checked the barn, refilled Boomer's water. I'd driven my pickup down to the creek on the edge of the ranch to fix a broken fence, spent about an hour out there before heading back. By the time I parked in front of the ranch house, I noticed a strange glint from the tree line near the road. I thought it might be a deer or maybe a neighbor's dog. But it was her. Karen. She stood half-hidden by the shrubs, holding her phone, pointing it at my truck. I shook my head and muttered, "What now?" Boomer barked. I snapped my fingers for him to hush and went inside. And that's when I checked the cameras. I'd set up 4 angles: front gate, barn path, side road, and porch view. The front gate camera caught her perfectly. She had walked onto my property, circled my truck slowly, even tried the handle. She hadn't seen the red recording light on the barn. She made the call just minutes later. And now here we were, 2 officers on my land. My dog agitated, Karen standing like the queen of the neighborhood, and me, seconds away from pressing play on her downfall. "Let me show you something," I said, walking to the house slowly. The sheriff followed me. His partner stayed near the truck. I turned on the TV in my living room and pulled up the camera footage from earlier. Fast-forwarded to 7:13 a.m. There she was, Judith Karen Cranston, clear as day, stepping onto my property in her spotless white sandals. She leaned over, squinting into my truck window. Then she circled around, trying the door handle. "Pause right there," I said. "That's the moment she lied to you." The sheriff stared, then exhaled, slow and low. Outside, I heard his partner call in a code. Karen must have heard it too because her voice suddenly rang out high and loud. "This is harassment. That vehicle is not registered here." I walked back outside with the sheriff. "Ma'am," he said, "did you step onto this man's property without permission?" "I was protecting the community." "Did you tell the dispatcher this was a stolen vehicle?" I didn't say it like that." "Actually, you did," the sheriff cut in. "We have your call on record, and now we've got your face on footage. That's trespassing and filing a false police report." Karen's face drained of color. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. But that wasn't the end of it. Because just as the sheriff stepped toward her, a white sedan pulled up behind her on the road. A younger woman stepped out. Blonde ponytail, lawyer suit, binder in hand. She looked straight at Karen. "Aunt Judith," she said sharply, "I told you to stop this. I told you one more false call, and I'd have no choice." Karen turned, stunned. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "I'm representing Mr. Coleman. You're going to be served." And that's when Karen snapped. She grabbed the folder from her niece's hand and threw it in the dirt. That was when I knew this was just the beginning. And I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Karen's hands were shaking as she screamed at her niece. "You're siding with him, with this man, over your own family." Her voice cracked, her eyes wild. She pointed at me like I was a threat to the entire universe. Emily calmly bent down, picked up the binder, and dusted it off. She didn't flinch. "I told you, Aunt Judith, this is your last warning. You've filed 3 false reports in the last 6 months, and this time we have footage, witnesses, and police records. I was protecting the neighborhood." "No," Emily said sternly. "You were harassing a man on private property, and I'm not just here as your niece today, I'm also here as his legal counsel. Mr. Coleman hired me this morning." I had never seen Karen that rattled. For once, she was speechless. She stared at the camera on the corner of my barn as if it had just betrayed her deepest secret. The sheriff glanced between all of us. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. You're not under arrest yet, but we are going to need a formal statement. And trust me, this is going in our report." Karen blinked fast, then turned and stormed off toward her silver SUV. Her tires spun up a cloud of dust as she sped away down the road, leaving a trail of tension behind her. Emily turned to me and sighed. "Well, that escalated." "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," I said. "Family drama and all." Emily shook her head. "She's been doing stuff like this for years. Complaining to stores, screaming at drive-through workers, suing her neighbors for paint colors. My mom won't even talk to her anymore." "Well," I said, glancing toward the camera, "I think she finally bit off more than she could chew." What I didn't know then was just how far Karen was willing to go to get revenge. Later that afternoon, after the officers had left and Emily drove back to her office, I sat down on the porch with Boomer and tried to process it all. I'd always kept to myself, always stayed in my own lane. My ranch was peaceful, my world was simple. But with Pleasant Acres creeping closer every year, and people like Karen trying to reach across the fence line literally and legally, I realized that sometimes peace needs protection. I checked my phone. Emily had sent over a copy of the footage along with a note. "Let me know if she tries anything else. I'm on retainer." I chuckled. She was tough, I liked that. The sun was setting over the field, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing like crazy. I rubbed my eyes and sat up. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from neighbors. When I listened to the first one, I froze. "Jake, it's Tom from down the road. Man, you need to check the HOA website. They've posted something about you. It ain't pretty." The second one, "Jake, I think that HOA lady got into your business again. She's claiming you're running an illegal scrapyard." Scrapyard. What? I opened my laptop and went straight to the Pleasant Acres HOA community board. Sure enough, front and center. Warning. Potential scrap operation at Green Rock Ridge. Unregistered vehicles, excessive equipment and unsafe conditions. Community safety at risk. And under it, pictures. Zoomed in, grainy, obviously taken from the road. Photos of my tractor, my plow, a pile of wood by the barn I'd been drying out. One photo even showed my nephew's dirt bike parked by the shed. All of them labeled with bold red letters. Code violation. Unsafe. Investigation required. And under that, a petition. A petition. Calling for the county to investigate and shut down Green Rock Ridge until the landowner complies with zoning and community safety regulations. And the signature count? Already at 46. My blood ran cold. Karen had declared war. I drove straight to town, straight to the county clerk's office. Marla, the clerk, was an old friend from high school. She saw the storm on my face before I even said a word. "Jake, what happened? I need to know. Has anyone filed a formal complaint about my ranch?" She pulled up the records. "Just came in this morning. Multiple files. All submitted by Judith Cranston. She claims your property poses a safety threat to the surrounding community and may be in violation of zoning laws." "What zoning laws?" I asked. "I've owned that land since I was 24. It's agricultural, zoned and registered." Marla nodded. "It is, but she's pushing for a reevaluation. Claims your use of certain vehicles qualifies as light industrial activity." "That's insane," I snapped. "This is a ranch, not a car factory." "She also requested aerial inspection," Marla added, turning her monitor toward me. "And she filed a community impact form demanding code enforcement visit your property." I leaned on the counter and exhaled. "Can they do that?" Marla frowned. "They can try, but it'll take time to review. Meanwhile, if enough noise gets made, if local council hears about it, it could become a political issue, and that's never good. Karen's turning this into a campaign," I muttered. "And I bet she's not finished yet." I left the office with a pit in my stomach. This wasn't about my truck anymore. It was about my ranch, my home, my livelihood. When I got back to Green Rock Ridge, I saw it. A bright red sign staked into the ground right outside my fence line. It read, "Pending County Review, Unregistered Commercial Site." And below that, in smaller text, "Notice to neighbors, we fight for community safety." Stamped with the HOA logo. Boomer barked. I stood there frozen. And that's when my phone buzzed again. A message from Emily. "Jake, we have a problem. You're going to want to see this video Karen just posted online. Call me now." I clicked the link. It was Karen, standing in front of her HOA clubhouse, speaking to a small group of Pleasant Acres residents. A shaky video, likely recorded on someone's phone. Her voice rang clear. "This man's truck didn't even have tags. His equipment is rusting and dangerous. Our kids ride their bikes past his land. I've called the county. And if the law won't do something, then we will." The crowd applauded, and that's when she said it. "I'll get him out of there, one way or another." I dropped the phone. Karen wasn't just pushing boundaries anymore. She was preparing to tear mine down, and I had no idea how far she was about to go. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a loud bang outside my bedroom window. Boomer was already barking like crazy. I jumped out of bed, threw on my boots, and grabbed my rifle. Not loaded, but always by the door. When you live on a ranch, you don't assume the worst, but you stay ready. I rushed out to the porch and saw dust clouds rising near the western fence line. A pickup truck, one I didn't recognize, had backed into my fence. A whole section was knocked clean down. 2 men in reflective vests were already unloading something heavy from the truck bed. It looked like a tall metal post. I shouted, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" One of the men looked up, confused. "Installing a boundary marker, sir. Got the order right here." "Who sent you?" "The HOA," the other man answered. "Pleasant Acres. Said the line needed to be adjusted to match the original neighborhood plat." That was the moment it hit me like a punch to the chest. Karen was trying to redraw my property line. I stormed over, heart pounding, my boots kicking up dirt. This is my land, my fence, my deeds in the house, and it hasn't moved an inch since 1984. The first man looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we're just following instructions. You can call the office if you want." "I'll do more than that," I snapped. "You touch one more nail on my property, and you'll be trespassing." Boomer stood behind me, teeth bared, growling low. The workers took a nervous step back. "We'll just leave this here then." They dropped the metal post and left in a hurry, tires screeching. I stood in the wreckage of my own fence, staring at the bent barbed wire, thinking, she's really lost her mind now. I spent the rest of that morning on the phone, first with Emily, then the county records office, then the local land surveyor. Emily promised to file a cease and desist, but warned me it might take a few days to process. "She's using delay tactics," she said. "She knows even if she can't win, she can wear you down." "She doesn't know who she's messing with," I replied. Emily paused. "Jake, she's calling in a zoning board review next week. Be ready." I nodded, even though I felt the weight of it all settling on my shoulders. It wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about protecting everything I had worked for. I spent the rest of the day fixing the fence, hammering new posts in with sweat pouring down my back. Boomer lay nearby watching, his ears twitching every time a car passed. I kept replaying Karen's words from the video. "I'll get him out of there, one way or another." That evening, I drove into town to grab feed from the co-op. The guy behind the counter, Marvin, gave me a strange look as I walked in. "You holding up okay?" I raised an eyebrow. "Why? You haven't seen the post?" "What post?" Marvin flipped his phone around and showed me a Facebook thread from the Pleasant Acres community page. It was a picture of me, taken from behind a tree near the edge of my property. I was shirtless, working in the sun, bent over a post hole. The caption read, Is this really the kind of view our kids need next to our homes? This man has no decency. Time to clean up the neighborhood. Judith C. The comments were filled with Karen's friends agreeing. One woman wrote, "Disgusting, this isn't the jungle." Another said, "Our HOA dues shouldn't go to waste fighting these kinds of people." My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "She's spying on me now," I muttered. Marvin looked apologetic. "People talk, Jake, but plenty of folks don't agree with her either. You ain't alone in this." I appreciated the words, but deep down I knew Karen's reach was spreading. She was poisoning the well, bit by bit. And then came the moment I didn't expect. Marvin added, "She told folks at the town hall she's organizing a neighborhood patrol. Claims you've got firearms lying around and kids are at risk." That made me laugh, but not because it was funny. It was pure disbelief. She was accusing me of being dangerous on my own land. That night I barely slept. I spent hours checking the cameras, repositioning them to cover every angle. I even set up a motion sensor by the barn. Boomer slept restlessly too, pacing more than usual. And then it happened. At 2:36 a.m., my security alert pinged. Movement at the front gate. I opened the feed and saw it clearly. A dark figure crouching by the edge of my property, phone flashlight in hand, filming my truck, again. And it wasn't just anyone. It was Karen. She crept to the front of the gate, reached through and stuck a flyer onto my mailbox with duct tape. Then she turned and disappeared back into the night. I ran outside with a flashlight. Boomer was already ahead of me, barking down the road. The flyer flapped in the breeze. I peeled it off and read the headline, "Stand Against Unsafe Neighbors, Join Our HO Patrol Today." Below it, a blurry photo of my truck, my tools, my generator. Her notes scribbled across the bottom. "No license plates, abandoned, unregistered use, unknown hazards." She was building a case, a public one. But what she didn't know? The cameras had caught everything, every footstep, every second, every whisper into her phone. And this time, I had audio too. I smiled for the first time in days. Because if Karen wanted to play games, I had just loaded the winning piece on the board. But just when I thought I was ready to strike back. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange sticker slapped across my truck windshield. County violation. Vehicle under investigation. Do not move, and just beneath it, a tow notice. Scheduled for pickup, 10 a.m. I looked at my watch. 9:42 a.m. She'd done it. She'd actually sent the tow truck, on my own land, and I had 18 minutes to stop it. I sprinted down the gravel path, nearly twisting my ankle in the process. Boomer barked wildly behind me as I dashed toward the pickup. The orange sticker stared back at me like some cruel joke. I yanked it off and threw it to the ground, breathing hard. My heart pounded in my ears. I looked up the road, and sure enough, there it was. A massive white tow truck with flashing amber lights barreling toward my ranch gate like it had every right to be there. "Not today," I growled under my breath. I stepped in front of my truck, arms folded. Boomer stood beside me, tail stiff, teeth bared. The tow truck slowed to a stop just feet away. A lanky man in his late 40s jumped out. Greasy jeans, neon safety vest, chewing something like gum or tobacco. Maybe both. "You Coleman?" he asked lazily. "I am. Got a job order here to tow this vehicle. Registered complaint from the county. Said it's been abandoned and tagged for collection." "Abandoned?" I laughed. "It's parked in my driveway, in front of my home, on my land." He shrugged. "Look, man, I just drive the truck. Your HOA flagged it, county backed the claim. If I don't haul it, they fine me." I narrowed my eyes. "You realize this is private property, right?" The tow guy looked around. "Honestly, don't care. I get paid either way." He reached into the cab and pulled out a clipboard. I walked right up to him. "I've got cameras all over this property, and I've got footage of the woman who filed the claim trespassing here at 2:30 a.m. last night. If you so much as lay a hand on this truck, I swear to you, You'll be in court by next week." He hesitated. Boomer barked again. All right, easy," he muttered, glancing toward the gate. "Just let me make a call." He stepped away, dialed a number, and turned his back. I used that moment to take out my phone. I called Emily. She answered on the first ring. "Jake? I need you here. Now." "What happened?" "She's towing my truck." There was silence. Then, "I'm on my way." I could hear her already shuffling papers and grabbing her keys. "Stall him," she said. "I'll be there in 15. The tow truck driver stayed on the phone longer than I expected. He kept nodding, mumbling, "Yup, okay, yeah, he's here." Then finally, "Got it." He turned back to me. "Look, Mr. Coleman, my supervisor says I can't tow without an enforcement officer present since the complaint's disputed." "Good," I said flatly, "but they're sending one out." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "County code officer. She'll be here soon." Of course. Karen's influence had gotten someone from the county out here now. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. 15 minutes later, a Silver County vehicle rolled up the path. A woman in a navy blue blazer and tan slacks stepped out. She looked official. Clipboard. ID badge. Tired eyes that had seen too many people yelling about grass height and broken sheds. "Mr. Coleman?" she asked politely. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Nancy, Zoning and Property Compliance Division. We received a formal complaint regarding an unregistered vehicle. We are required by law to inspect and verify. This is my truck. It's registered, inspected, and insured. I've had it for 7 years. Parked right here on my private ranch." "I understand," she said. "But the complaint included photo evidence, claimed it hadn't moved in over 90 days. I couldn't believe it. "That's false. We have to verify." At that moment, Emily's black SUV skidded up the drive, dust flying behind it. She stepped out in heels, holding her phone and a manila folder like she was about to go to war. "Hi," she said, walking right up to Nancy. "Emily Baker, licensed attorney representing Mr. Coleman." Nancy blinked, surprised. "Oh, I didn't realize he had counsel involved." "We do now," Emily replied firmly. "And I have camera footage that shows the complainant, Judith Cranston, trespassing here last night to fabricate those photos." Emily opened the folder and pulled out stills from the security footage. Karen, in pajamas, creeping through my gate. Karen taping the flyer. Karen shining a flashlight on my truck at 2:36 a.m. Nancy took a long look. "Is this time-stamped?" "Yes. It also has audio. Would you like to hear the part where she whispers to herself, 'I'll get him towed by sunrise'?" Nancy paused. I need to escalate this," she said quietly. "This goes beyond a simple complaint. This looks like targeted harassment." The tow driver grumbled. "So am I towing or not?" "No," Nancy snapped. "Stand down. I'll notify your dispatcher." He threw up his hands. "Y'all don't pay me enough for this." He unhooked the truck and pulled away without another word. Emily turned to me with a smirk. "You okay?" "Better now." Boomer wagged his tail. But the calm didn't last long, because just as Emily and I were walking back to the porch, I noticed something stuck under my front door. A letter. Typed. Folded. Stamped with HOA seal. I opened it, and the first line hit like a thunderbolt. "This is your final warning. Remove all non-neighborhood standard equipment and cease operations within 72 hours or face civil litigation." And then the real kicker. "This includes tractors, utility trailers, poultry housing, and open-air storage sheds. Your lifestyle does not meet the aesthetic standards of Pleasant Acres." I read it 3 times. "Is this a joke?" Emily asked, taking the paper from me. "It's real," I muttered. "She's trying to erase my entire ranch one piece at a time." Emily clenched her jaw. "Then it's time we fight fire with fire." But just as we stepped inside to prepare our next move, my phone rang again. It was Tom, my neighbor down the road. Jake, he said, voice shaky. I think you better come quick. Why? They're on your west field, with a drone and measuring tape. Karen's out there with someone from the HOA board. I grabbed my keys, heart pounding. She's surveying my land? Looks that way, Tom said. And she's got a document in her hand. What kind of document? He hesitated. Jake, I think it's a forged deed. The tires of my truck kicked up clouds of dust as I tore across the ranch toward the west field. Boomer was in the back seat, barking nonstop, sensing the tension vibrating off me like a live wire. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. A forged deed. That's not something you mishear. That's not a joke a neighbor makes. If Karen was waving around fake documents, it meant this war had officially crossed every line imaginable. As I reached the crest of the ridge, the sight below made my heart sink. There they were. Karen Cranston in a wide-brimmed sun hat, arms folded across her white blouse like she was surveying her royal kingdom. Beside her stood a man in a blazer too stiff for the Texas sun, holding a clipboard and a rolled-up tube, probably blueprints or a fake land survey. And above them a small drone buzzed loudly, zipping over my property like it owned the sky. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop just a few feet from them. I jumped out and marched straight toward the group. Karen turned and offered a smug smile. "Oh, Mr. Coleman," she said sweetly, "we didn't expect you so soon. We were just concluding our preliminary assessment." "Preliminary what?" I barked. "On my land?" The man beside her cleared his throat. "Good morning. I'm Richard Fraley, president of the Pleasant Acres HOA board. We've been reviewing recent boundary disputes." "There are no disputes," I snapped. "I've owned this land for nearly 30 years. I have the deed, the surveys, the tax history, all in my home office. What exactly are you doing on my field?" Karen smirked. "This land borders Pleasant Acres, and I've been working with the original development files. Turns out, your western pasture may have been part of the original planned expansion lot from 1993. It's likely an administrative oversight." "Is that so?" I said coldly. Richard held up a document. "Here's a copy of the revised map." I snatched it from his hand and glanced at it. It was a blueprint-style diagram of Pleasant Acres, except they had drawn a huge chunk of my ranch inside their property line. As if by magic, they'd annexed 5 acres of my west pasture into their neighborhood. "Where'd you get this?" I demanded. "It was found in old development archives," Karen chimed in. "And until the matter is resolved, we believe it's best to cease any activity in this zone." "You think I'm going to stop using my own land because of some printout you cooked up in a copy room? We've already submitted it to zoning for review," Richard said calmly. "If your paperwork doesn't match, the land can be contested, especially if there's confusion in county records." I was so stunned I almost couldn't speak. Almost. "You do realize," I said slowly, "you just admitted, in front of multiple cameras and 2 witnesses, that you entered private land, conducted surveillance with a drone, and attempted to redefine legal boundaries using what is very likely forged paperwork." Karen's eyes flickered. I pointed up to the drone. "And you flew that over my livestock pens, which violates FAA low-altitude restrictions on private land." Karen's face fell. Richard cleared his throat. "We're simply gathering data." "You're trespassing," I said, "and that drone's coming down, now." I turned, stormed back to my truck, and grabbed my radio. I called the sheriff. "Sheriff Blake here. This is Jake Coleman. I need you at my west field. Got HOA members with fake maps and a drone over my land." There was a pause. "Again?" "Worse this time," I said. "They're claiming they own 5 acres of my pasture." "I'll be there in 20. By the time the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, a small crowd had formed. Some of my neighbors, including Tom, had driven over to see what the ruckus was. Word had spread fast. Sheriff Blake stepped out of the car, sunglasses on, arms swinging low. "All right," he said. "Let's start from the top." Karen immediately sprang into action, waving the blueprint. "Sheriff, we're conducting a legal survey. This land may fall under the HOA development plan from 1993. Ma'am, he interrupted, I've seen this property line since I was 10 years old. I used to bale hay right on that fence line with Jake's daddy. You're about a decade and a half too late. Karen bristled. With all due respect, none taken, Blake said. Now step back. Mr. Coleman, you got proof? I walked to my truck, grabbed my manila folder, and handed him the documents. Survey maps, county records, tax stamps, a notarized deed, all dated, all official. Sheriff Blake scanned them, nodded once, and turned to Richard. This here's airtight. Y'all brought a drone over a ranch with livestock without permission, tried to change boundaries with no legal authority, and trespassed. Richard began to sweat. Karen, still not giving up, said, I'll be taking this to our HOA legal team. This isn't over. Blake tipped his sunglasses. Ma'am, you just earned yourself a citation. Interfering with private property, unauthorized surveillance, and unlawful claim of land. I'd back off if I were you. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Boomer barked once, loud and proud, from the ridge. The sheriff wrote them both citations, and Richard nearly collapsed under the weight of Karen's glare. They left, defeated for the day, but I knew in my bones this wasn't the end. Later that evening, Emily came over. We sat on the porch, sipping cold tea, watching the sun drop behind the ridge. I'm filing for a restraining order, she said, against Karen and the HOA. We're building a case for civil harassment. Think we've got a shot? Emily nodded. With this much evidence? Absolutely. But we need to stay ahead of her. She's obsessed with forcing you out. What do you think she's after? I asked. She can't just hate me this much over a truck and a few chickens. Emily sipped her tea. Sometimes people like her don't need a reason. Control is the reason. And right now, you're the one thing she can't control. We sat in silence a moment longer. Then Boomer stood up suddenly, ears perked. I followed his gaze down the driveway and my stomach flipped. A black sedan had pulled up near my gate. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out. He didn't wave, didn't smile. Just opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to Boomer, just kidding. He handed it to me. Mr. Coleman? Yes? You've been served. It was a lawsuit, filed by the Pleasant Acres Homeowners Association. They were suing me for public nuisance, devaluation of property, and aggressive behavior toward community leadership. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because I knew. This just became a war for survival. I stared at the envelope in my hands. Thick, heavy, the kind of legal document that's meant to shake you before you even open it. The man in the gray suit was already walking back to his car. He didn't look back, didn't say another word. Just climbed into the sedan and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the golden light of early evening. Emily took the envelope from me carefully, like it might explode. She opened it slowly. Her lawyer instincts kicked in immediately. She flipped through the pages with sharp, precise movements, eyebrows rising higher with every line she read. Then she sighed. Jake, this is worse than I thought. How bad? She looked up. They're trying to frame you as a hostile entity. A what? They're claiming your ranch is a danger to the peace and stability of the Pleasant Acres community. They included photos of your equipment, Boomer barking at the fence, even screenshots from the footage you uploaded to clear your name. But that footage shows Karen trespassing. I know. But they've cropped it, taken it out of context. There's a whole section here accusing you of deliberate aggression and intimidation through the use of livestock and unlicensed surveillance. I blinked. Livestock? You mean my chickens? Emily nodded, dead serious. They're calling Boomer a threatening animal, and your rooster a noise pollutant. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I rubbed my face. So what now? What do we do? Emily snapped the folder shut. We fight. We expose everything. We bring in your neighbors, the sheriff, every record we can. We prove harassment, defamation, and property interference. And if we win, If. If we win, she repeated. You can sue them right back for damages. But we have to get ready now. Their court date is in 10 days. The next few days were a whirlwind. Emily and I built the case like our lives depended on it. In some ways, mine did. My livelihood, my home, everything I stood for was wrapped up in that land. We gathered security footage, emails, incident logs, witness statements. Sheriff Blake gave us a formal report outlining Karen's false 911 call, the forged boundary claim, and the drone violation. That was a huge win. Tom and 5 other neighbors signed sworn statements saying they'd witnessed Karen on my land more than once, often filming or taking photos without permission. We even found the original land survey map from the county archives. The real one. The one that clearly marked Green Rock Ridge as a standalone agricultural parcel with no overlap with Pleasant Acres. Everything was lining up. But Karen wasn't done. 2 nights before the court hearing, I was sitting on the porch with Boomer when I saw it. Headlights, 2 of them, flickering through the trees. I stood up slowly, heart sinking. A pair of figures climbed out of the SUV. One of them was Karen. The other was a man in a hard hat holding a clipboard and a tool belt. They walked to the edge of my southern field, the one where I kept old fencing materials and equipment waiting for repair. I turned on the spotlight mounted above my barn, flooded the entire area with light. Karen froze. She shielded her eyes. The man beside her panicked and dropped his clipboard. I walked down the path with Boomer right beside me. "What now, Karen?" I called out. She straightened her back like she was the Queen of Texas. "Just conducting an inspection. This area was flagged for environmental hazard and unpermitted structures." "By who?" I snapped. She smiled coldly. "Anonymous community complaint. The county gave us permission to photograph and document." "Got that in writing?" She didn't answer. The man with her backed away slowly, mumbling something about needing to check his emails. He climbed back into the car and drove off, leaving Karen standing there in the dirt. "You know what this is, right?" I said, stepping closer. She didn't speak. "It's your last desperate move. You're losing, and you know it." Karen's face twisted. For a moment, I saw something flash in her eyes. Not pride, not power, just fear. "You don't belong here," she whispered. "Your ranch is ugly. Your animals are noisy. Your truck is an eyesore. You bring our property values down." "No," I said quietly. "I remind you that there are people who don't care about picket fences and matching mailboxes, people who work hard and live honest. And that scares you." She turned and stormed back to her car, and I stood there in the night, the floodlight humming above me, knowing she'd finally run out of tricks. Or so I thought. The day of the hearing arrived fast. Emily wore her sharpest suit and had everything color-coded and tabbed. I wore my cleanest jeans and a pressed button-down. Boomer stayed at the ranch, probably wondering where all the peace had gone. The courtroom was small, just a county space, nothing flashy. Karen arrived in all white naturally, with 2 HOA board members trailing behind her. She didn't look at me, just sat stiffly at her table, face unreadable. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and tired eyes, called the hearing to order. Karen's lawyer spoke first, and it was a disaster. They spun lies, said I refused to communicate, that my hostile livestock caused fear among residents, that my equipment created visual pollution, that I threatened HOA members with firearms. Emily rose to her feet like a lioness. "Your Honor," she said, "we have extensive security footage, official sheriff's reports, and sworn witness statements proving not only that Mr. Coleman acted lawfully, but that Ms. Cranston trespassed, filed false police reports, and attempted to illegally alter property lines." She laid the evidence on the table like a final hand of poker. The judge spent 30 minutes reviewing everything. Then she looked up and asked just one question. "Ms. Cranston, can you explain why you were seen at 2:36 a.m. on Mr. Coleman's land?" Karen stammered. I was concerned for the community. You taped a flyer to his mailbox in the middle of the night." Karen blinked. I was doing what's best for the neighborhood, and forged a map that does not match any record in county files. Karen's face went pale. The judge sat back in her chair. "Well," she said, "I've heard enough." And with those 5 words, everything changed. But what the judge said next stunned the entire courtroom. The judge removed her glasses, folded her hands on the desk, and took a long breath before speaking. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the ceiling fan and the scratching of a pen from the court clerk. "In all my years serving on the bench," she began, her voice calm but sharp, "I have rarely seen such a blatant abuse of community power. Ms. Cranston, this is not the 1800s. You cannot storm a man's land and lay false claims because you don't like the way he lives." Karen's face was drained of color. Her lawyer tried to shuffle papers, whispering frantically in her ear, but the judge raised a hand to silence him. "This court finds no merit in the claims made by the Pleasant Acres Homeowners Association. In fact," she paused, looking directly at Karen, "the court is considering a counteraction for civil harassment." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge turned to Emily. "Ms. Baker, you may proceed with your client's countersuit. Based on what I've reviewed today, he has clear grounds for damages: emotional distress, defamation, unlawful surveillance, and multiple instances of trespassing." Emily smiled, calm and razor-sharp. "Thank you, Your Honor. We'll be filing immediately." Karen's mouth dropped open. "This is absurd. He has loud animals. His barn is an eyesore. He drives a filthy truck." The judge leaned forward slowly. "Ms. Cranston, sit down." Karen dropped into her chair like someone had cut the strings on a puppet. The HOA board members with her shifted awkwardly, looking like they regretted ever following her lead. Then the gavel dropped. "Case dismissed. Countersuit may proceed. Court adjourned." Boom. Just like that. Justice. Outside the courthouse, Tom was waiting. So were a few other ranch neighbors who'd shown up in quiet support. They clapped me on the back. One handed me a sweet tea. Another said, "About time someone stood up to her." Emily and I walked to the truck in silence, the sun high above us. She glanced at me as I opened the door. "You handled that well." "I didn't handle anything," I said. "You did." "Nope," she said. "You stayed calm, you stayed decent, and you stood your ground. That's what real men do." I smiled. "Well, what now?" "We wait for the court to process the countersuit. Then we see how far we want to take it." "I want everything on the record," I said. "Everything she did. Not just for me. For anyone else she's harassed." Emily nodded. "Good. We'll make sure of it." Then she looked toward the west pasture, the one Karen had tried to claim. "You ever think about putting up a big old wooden sign out there? Something that says, 'Still mine'?" I laughed. "Nah, I've got something better." 3 weeks later, I hosted a BBQ on the ranch. Open invite. Neighbors, ranchers, even some of the newer folks from Pleasant Acres who didn't support Karen showed up. We grilled, played country music, let the kids ride Boomer like he was a tiny cow pony. And right at the edge of the west field, I unveiled it. Not a sign. A flagpole, flying proudly at the top. An old rancher's flag that read, "Don't fence me in." Below it, a brand new banner. "Green Rock Ridge, established 1984. We stand our ground." People cheered. Karen? She didn't show. Word around town was she'd been removed from the HOA board. Her niece, Emily's cousin, had filed an ethics complaint against her, and most of the community wanted her gone. Rumor had it she'd put her house up for sale. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from Karen. From the HOA board president, Richard. He had resigned. The letter apologized for failing to properly investigate community concerns, and admitted that Karen had acted without authorization in several incidents. He wrote, "Mr. Coleman, you've reminded us that respect for property lines is also about respecting people's lives." Funny how things change. One last thing. A week before Christmas, a delivery truck pulled up to my ranch. The driver handed me a box with no return address. Inside, a single item, a hand-carved wooden plaque. Burned into it were the words, "Sorry." I recognized the handwriting on the small sticky note attached. It was Karen's. No signature, just a single word. Maybe she finally realized that decency matters more than decorative fences and fake deeds. Or maybe she just knew. I had her on security footage, and in the end, that was all I ever needed.